Started. Make sure everyone can hear me okay. Rachel Owen, the host tonight, will definitely help us out with kind of responding to some of the chats that come in as we go along. So please don't hesitate to use that chat function if you have questions and that as we go along. So I wanted to start off and just welcome everyone. This is our first event associated with AJAS 2024. Welcome to all of you. We are excited. We've been planning AJAS for 6 or more months now, and are getting really excited that we're only a little over a month away from Denver. So very excited to be able to get out there and see all the great stuff that all of you are working on. So I want to get started on and want to make sure everyone's seeing. I think I'm screen sharing. You should see a picture of me here on the front. Just want to make sure that I'm screen sharing okay here on my slides.
Yep, we see you, John.
All right, great. I just wanted to make sure my screen looks a little different. So today what we're going to do is introduction and look at best practices in poster design. And when I say best practices, you know, there's a little bit of implicit bias in that in terms of what I think of as best and what many of you or other scientists may think of as best practices. So what I've tried to do is to kind of look through a lot of different examples to bring together what I think are some of the common best practices that are used in poster design, share those with you, and then we'll look at a couple examples. So my name's John Kaup. I serve as Director of Science Education at Furman University. I'm also the Executive Director of the South Carolina Junior Academy of Science and serve on the NAAS board as well as the AJAS Planning Committee. My PhD is in physical chemistry, so I've been doing posters for a long time. I think I was thinking back, it's been a little over 30 years since I made my first poster. So I've been doing this for a while, but as you'll see as we go along, things have changed a lot in terms of the technology and how these are generated. So let me click here. So these are objectives. One thing we want to do is talk to you about the specific requirements for presenting your poster. So we'll hit that. We'll talk about an overview of some different types of poster formats. We will talk about best practices in poster design and give you some ideas of what you might want to use in that process. And then we'll review some poster examples and consider some strengths and weaknesses of different posters. And we hope by the end of today, through these objectives, that you're going to feel confident in designing a poster that will engage and draw in AAAS and AJAS attendees and convey the outstanding research that all of you have done. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is to familiarize yourself with what we're expecting of you as requirements for presenting your poster. Okay. The first thing is this is an in-person event. I think everybody knows that, but you got to bring your poster with you to Denver. Okay. We'll be presenting the posters at the AAAS meeting at the Colorado Convention Center on Saturday afternoon, February 17th. So it'll be kind of at the end of the 5 days that you're there, but we'll be presenting those in person. Each of you will be provided with a poster board that's 48 inches wide and 36 inches tall. And we will pin or clip your poster onto that board. We'll help you to attach that to that. So all you need to do is bring your poster. You don't need pins or clips or tape or anything else. Just bring your poster along. Poster dimensions should be 48 inches wide by 36 inches tall. Okay, that's what would prefer. If some of you have already created a poster for another event that might be 36 wide and 48 tall or slightly different dimensions, we're going to have some office hours over the next couple weeks that you can jump on and talk to us about that if you have some specific questions. The two options that you have for presenting your research, one is a large format printed poster, and we'll talk about that. That's typically a single PowerPoint slide that you make. And the other way is to have smaller sheets where you have maybe titles and headings and images charts, text, everything else that's attached to the provided poster board. So those are the two options that you have: the single large format poster or bringing individual smaller sheets that you kind of put together. Often, if you're bringing those smaller sheets, you might even use some color matting on the back of it to kind of give it a little bit of color as you put all of that together. But those are the two options that you have. And then the fourth thing that I wanted to mention is the final approval on the poster, okay? The approval for that poster does not come from me and does not come from an AJAS or NAS representative. The final approval for your poster is coming from your chaperone or your state academy representative. Okay, we're going to provide some guidelines. We're going to provide some office hours to help with that, but they're the ones that are kind of giving you the thumbs up to print it or that you're ready to go with that. And the only other thing I would add is that that might also be if you have a specific research advisor that you worked with on that project, certainly consult them because they may have some guidelines on as you go along. And I mentioned for the PowerPoint, typically the way you do that, if you haven't done this before, within PowerPoint, if you click on the design option, you can go to slide size, select custom size, and then set up that single PowerPoint slide as being 48 inches wide by 36 inches tall in landscape mode. And then that is going to be your platform that you're adding your images and everything else that you have on there as you go through. Okay, so that's the specific requirements. If we look at different types of poster formats, there's a large variety of formats that can be used and that are used within the scientific community. I'm going to talk about two specific ones that I think are typically out there. One of them looks somewhat like what we have on the left. It sort of has a normal flow to it with sort of an abstract and intro, getting data, conclusions, and that as you sort of move from left to right across that. The second type is what is often called the hashtag better poster or poster 2.0 approach. And that one is sort of on the right, where you often have a hero image or a simple statement as a large portion of the middle of that poster that is there to attract people and pull them in to your poster. This second type for AJAS 2021, 22, and 23, when we did virtual posters, we sort of used that format. And for any of you that participated before or chaperones, Mike Morrison did a great job and shared the better poster design of how you can do that. And that's the approach that we used for those past 3 years. With the in-person posters that we're doing, this is definitely one option for how you want to design your poster or what you want to do. And you can see on this right one, this is one example of a poster where they just have a short statement in the middle with a figure that's there to sort of be simple and attractive to pull somebody into the poster. They have a little bit of their background results, a little bit of detail on there. But that approach can be used to kind of pull people into that. There's also a webinar that Mike Morrison offered last year that we will share out to all the registered delegates. The other type of poster that you can have is what I would consider a more traditional scientific poster. And these two are ones that I just literally walked down the hall and snapped a couple pictures of two posters that we had here. And those looked like the template I showed you before, often having the introduction or abstract on here, and then a flow of methods used, results, conclusions, being sure that there are references and acknowledgments at the end of it. Similarly here, a lot of figures that they have from some scanning electron microscopy imaging that they did, as well as some figures trying to describe some of the techniques. So those are the sort of two types of poster formats. And then there's a lot of them in between that. And you'll see in a minute as we step through, you can design your own poster design that you want that best reflects the research that you did. Okay, so at this point, I just wanted to pause for a moment. We familiarized you with the specific requirements and provided a little bit of overview of the variety of poster formats that are used within the scientific community. And definitely want to just pause for a second to see if there are any specific questions that anyone has at this time or anything that might have come through the chat so far.
Hey, John, I got a question. Does the research that we submit at the State Academy need to be the exact same as the National Academy?
I think the research that you are presenting at the AAAS meeting should be the research that you submitted as your abstract for the AAAS meeting. I think for a lot of the academies, the research that you did is what they're basing on selecting their delegates for that. But I think that's really a decision for the state academies. But what you don't want to do is submit an abstract to AAAS and then present a completely different poster. The title might change. You might have some new data that you have for that, but I would suggest not completely switching to a different type of project for that. Any other questions? I know we're kind of just getting started, so that's okay.
No other questions that I see, and it doesn't look like anybody has their hand raised right now.
Okay, great. Well, let's step through.
Oh, actually, sorry, one more question came through.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there an option to use a trifold poster, or should we turn it into the dimensions given?
So the trifold posters are often used as the 48-inch wide by 36-inch tall. So the poster board that we're going to be attaching your poster to is actually a trifold poster board that we're going to purchase and have out there to be able to mount onto that. So if you have a trifold poster board that meets those dimensions, absolutely you can bring that. Sometimes those are a little challenging to bring on a plane if you're flying, whereas a tube poster you can roll up a little bit more easily. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the best practices. So get into actual design of the poster itself. So the first thing I want to do is just talk about a couple guidelines or suggestions, kind of broad ones. The size, that 48 by 36, is again what we're asking you to put together for this conference. And that's pretty standard for most conferences that you go to. So we're sort of being consistent there. The landscape orientation is often preferred. It's just a little easier to get it on the boards and be able to look at it rather than having to look way up and down when you have it in portrait mode with a really high long dimension in that way. The subsections that you have for your poster are going to depend on your specific research and what you're trying to work on. There are a lot of different sections that people typically use. You certainly will want to have a title. You want to have your information, your name and that on the top of it. You'll have introduction. There may be background information. You have a hypothesis that you had, techniques, data, future work, references. All of these are different subsections of the poster that you're going to kind of lay out, and we'll see some examples of as we go through here in a moment. The one thing on there, you'll see abstract listed with a strike through. At most conferences, the abstract is not something that you need to include on your poster. The poster is going to explain the content that you have in that abstract, but you don't need to take away some of the space that you have in your poster by inserting that abstract as one additional text box on there. You'll see a couple of the examples that I'll show have abstracts, and in some cases, a conference requires that abstract be submitted for on the poster for that. Ours definitely does not require that, and I would encourage you to have some sort of introduction, but perhaps not the specific abstract that you had. And the last thing is looking at font sizes. So when you start working with a PowerPoint slide that's 48 inches by 36, what you need to do is think about those font sizes so that when this thing is printed, people from about 4 or 6 feet away can kind of see the different sections of that. And so these are a great range for those font sizes to think about. You can tweak that yourself a little bit as you get in there, but having those at that level and nothing less than 18 point on your poster will allow it to be readable from somewhat of a distance. And that's what you really want. You don't want people to have to come up a foot away from your poster before they can start reading the content that's on there. So the second thing that I want to talk is more sort of broad design considerations or principles that you should kind of think about when you're working on putting together your poster. One of those is looking at balance. So when I say distribute elements evenly across the poster, what you don't want to do is have all this text-heavy information on one side and all your pictures and figures on the other. You want to sort of have a balance. You want to distribute elements throughout the poster. A lot of these design considerations and principles are really trying to make your poster more appealing and attractive so that people want to come up and kind of view it. Alignment is another one. You'll see on most of these posters that we have, they'll either have sort of vertical or horizontal grid system on it. That's not defined on there, but you can kind of see the vertical nature of how the different sections are being presented and included on there. Contrast is another thing, another design feature that can be helpful. You can utilize contrasting colors, different font sizes or styles to draw attention to key elements. Okay, so you have this option on there to change things a little bit if it's something that you want people to be attracted to pay attention to that specific result that you got or that key element that you're trying to explain in your conclusion. Okay, the one thing that I would have a caveat with that is not too much. Okay, if you really have big contrast, it makes it a poster that's sort of off-putting a little bit. So use contrast, but use it limited so that you can focus in on the key element that you might have. Consistency is another important design consideration. And there, what you don't want is different font sizes and styles and colors throughout the poster. If you have subheadings, have those all as the same color, the same font size, maybe the same background behind them. You'll see some examples where they use a background for the subheadings, but be consistent across the poster. There's going to be some sort of hierarchy that you have in the overall poster. So again, you can use font sizes, weights, colors, and all that to make sure the most critical information stands out prominently. Okay, and that hierarchy can be used to make sure the subheadings, people can follow those properly. There's a lot of different ways that hierarchy can be used within the poster to make sure people are following. I think of hierarchy often and alignment as sort of creating the flow of the poster, helping people to figure out where they should be reading first and the order that they should be going through for that. And then the last one is simplicity. What you're not trying to do is to sort of blow everyone away with the knowledge that you have in terms of big words and acronyms and other things. Use concise language, simplify charts, graphs, figures to highlight key points. Once you attract somebody to your poster and they come in and start talking to you, then you can get into a lot more detail about that. And maybe somebody who's an expert in the field that you're working within, and you'll have this great conversation. But the poster itself can have a lot of simplicity to it to be able to attract a wide group of people into the poster and to be able to do that. All of these principles, I think what they do is they create a poster that's sort of comfortable and welcoming. So when somebody walks by it, they see the poster and think, that looks nice. They're kind of stepping in to read the title. They're able to follow nicely what's going in there. And that gives you the best chance of them wanting to come in and learn a little bit more about it. So a lot of this is trying to create a pleasing poster so that people will come and want to engage with you and talk to you about that. The last thing that I want to talk about just in terms of poster design are a couple more topics. One is fonts, how important fonts are. Sans serif fonts, Arial Helvetica, are definitely easier to read than some of the serif fonts. Garamond, Cambria, there's a whole list of both of these that you can kind of find. On a poster, again, you're trying to get good readability from 4 to 6 feet away. While these two on here, you know, AJAS is great and AJAS is great, probably look somewhat similar. I mean, they're different, obviously. If you have 500 to 1,000 words on your poster that look like this, it's just harder to read from a distance to be able to see it. All these extra sort of curly cues and stuff on these just make it overall more difficult to read. So stick with the sans serif fonts like this on the left and be more sharp so people can see that more readily. White space is okay. One thing when you're organizing this and putting together your poster, you'll see on there that you're wanting to pack a lot of information and pull this figure in really close to another picture that you have and bring a text box right up next to it. And you've got probably a lot of information that you want to share that you're trying to get into that poster. Make sure there's white space on the poster. And we'll look at some good examples of that in a little bit. But you need that white space for people to be comfortable reading it. It makes it more pleasing to have sort of a relaxed nature to it when there's some white space within that. Be sure to utilize high resolution pictures, figures, charts. Okay. When you're bringing a picture in, you could bring a small thumbnail picture or anything else. And when you're looking at it on that PowerPoint screen, it may look perfectly fine at a super low resolution. But what you need to do is to blow that up to 100% scale and look at those figures and see if they're fuzzy or pixelated or what they look like. So make sure you're bringing in high resolution pictures, figures, charts, so that when they blow up, you don't have a fuzzy look to the poster that you're going to present. And the last one is talking about the effective use of colors. You've got a great opportunity within PowerPoint to be able to use a huge palette of colors that you can use for that. Using those colors in different ways, using 2 or 3 different colors throughout it can make it appealing, engaging, could definitely help with highlighting different areas. Again, focusing in on those areas that you want people to. Using a lot of colors can also distract, detract, and overwhelm somebody. If you've got 20 different colors on a poster that you're looking at, it's just off-putting. It's just too much for somebody to kind of be able to come in. So use color on there. It can be a great opportunity to make things more appealing and highlighting things, but be careful with using too many of them when you do that. So now what I want to do is just review a couple poster examples and consider some of the strengths and weaknesses of a couple of these. And for some of these, I'm going to kind of ask for people to put into the chat suggestions that they have, or even put up your hand and share with us what you think about a certain poster in terms of what things you think are strengths and perhaps weaknesses associated with that. When you get started with it, often it's a lot easier to start with a template as opposed to just starting with that PowerPoint slide by itself and have to start putting everything in. So if you go online, you can literally probably find about 1 million different poster templates that are out there. And I've shared a couple of those here. This one in the landscape mode and is pretty traditional, where it has sort of the intro methods, data analysis results, steps all the way through these different sections. You may have different sections depending on what your research, your results for that. But any of these can kind of help you to get an idea of templates for font sizes for subheadings, color schemes, and things like that. The one to the right is a little bit more of a general one. but again, is a good one. It's a portrait, but I just wanted to show you two examples of those that you have there. Okay. This one is a poster just from Furman, a student here, and wanted to just show you to kind of step you through the sections that they had. So they had a short abstract and kind of intro at the beginning. They talked about the different instruments that they used. They talked about some previous data to kind of lean towards the scope of the project they were working on. They indicated parameters. They have a large data section with some highlighting. Presumably, these are the data that they want you to focus on or that provided the results that they were interested in. And then having some future work or acknowledgments is often helpful at the bottom of it to point in the direction of the new work that you're going to be doing. This one's kind of interesting in a way because they have here sort of their results right up front. So they have the intro and sort of a result right at the beginning of it. And I think that works on here. You're going to see, again, a lot of different flavors of posters in terms of where they're putting stuff for that. But you know, those are decisions that you can make with your chaperone and research advisor for that. Okay. So let's take a look at these. We're going to go through a couple slides at least where we look at and think about which of these posters is better designed and why. Okay. Now, when I say better designed, the same way when I said at the beginning about best practices, there's some bias in this. You're going to look at one of them and it might be research that you really like. And you go, wow, I love that poster. That looks great. I don't understand that one. And so it detracts from that. But what I want to do is just look at sort of design overall. How are things laid out? Is there white space? Are there text boxes? Do the fonts look adequate to be able to read from a distance? I'm a physical chemist. I love seeing lots of equations on a poster when I step up to something, but that's a bias that I have. There are not a lot of people that want to see all these mathematical equations on there. And so we all have a little bit of that bias that we have to get around. So let me set this one on here and show you. We got one here and one here. And just think about that a little bit and tell me, you know, kind of from maybe chatting, or if somebody wants to raise a hand, and Rachel, you want to call on somebody, I'd love to hear from a couple people based on some of those design characteristics and that we talked about. Which of these posters do you think is better designed and why? We have somebody that wants to jump on and provide some.
I know I felt like the left or the right one is better designed because it's like really keeping it simple and it like is eye-catching. So someone from 6 feet away might really be attracted to this poster, and it feels very approachable even if you're not an expert in this specific field.
Okay, great. All right. What do you think made that more attractive on the right? The simplicity you mentioned. Anything else?
There was like big text and like simple images and graphs, which made it feel very like easy to understand and approachable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the one on the left, it's interesting. If I approached both of these, a lot of the science that I see on the left, again, my own bias, I would love to look at those. I love seeing some of those images and trying to get in there. But there's a lot on that one on the left side. There's a lot of different colors that they're maybe doing an okay job with the colors, but there's just a lot there that I think is hard for anyone to try to get through. And what you really want is somebody to be able to view your poster and in a couple minutes to at least kind of be able to look through and just see what's going on with that. I think the poster on the left, anybody would be pretty challenged to be able to step through that nicely. All right, let's step to one other one and see what people have.
John, I think a useful question is to ask yourself, how long does it take for me to digest this information?
That's a great point. Is that Gary? Sounded like Gary.
Yeah, yeah, Gary.
No, that is a great, because if it's going to take a long time to digest, they are probably going to just pass by or, you know, and again, I kind of think of that as a little bit of being overwhelmed, like, wow, that maybe is just too much work for me. I think I'll step by and maybe get to another poster. So I would agree with you. Does somebody want to jump on and maybe talk about these two a little bit? Or give some.
The poster on the left has a lot of like words and it looks kind of small. So I feel like if I were seeing this poster in person, that would be a little more difficult to approach.
Okay. What do you think of the one on the right? What are strengths or weaknesses of that one?
Well, this one has a lot more graphs. But you said before if you use too many colors, it might be overwhelming, but overall it has less text, so it might be easier to look at.
Yeah, I think so. What about the grouping of things on the two? What do you think relative between the two in terms of how things are grouped? What comments would you share between the two?
Well, it kind of looks like they go by like introduction, methods, and then results. So maybe that's similar.
Mm-hmm. I think the one on the right too, the one thing that I like about that, I like the kind of boxes that they have for the different areas too. It definitely helps me a little bit to see where I'm working and to kind of step through the poster a little bit more. They have the same thing on the left side. I mean, abstract background, you can step through it. I like the one on the right a little bit more. I think your comment about the color too, there's a lot of color on there, but overall, to me, when I look at that one on the right, I don't feel overwhelmed by so many different colors. And I think these colors on the far right were really necessary to kind of link between some of the what they have here and some of the pictures or these cycles that they're trying to look at. So I would agree, though, one of the biggest mistakes I think that can be made is a little bit of what's happening over here with just way too much text on there. And for many of you, you may have written, I know in South Carolina, our delegates have all submitted a paper. And your inclination sometimes is to sort of take that paper and convert it into a poster. And that's not really what we're doing. You know, yes, you're taking the content from that research paper and graphs and data and that you're doing, but you're trying to tell a story that's appealing and not just slapping in text boxes into it. And it feels a little bit like this one on the left is sort of that way. The one on the right is definitely, to me, a lot more appealing. So, and then what I want to do is I've got about 4 or 5 more examples that I just wanted to kind of step through, and would definitely love to have people jump on and provide some feedback, and we can kind of have a conversation about a couple of these as we go through. So let me step to this one here and see if somebody wants to jump in and give a little bit of feedback on that one.
I like that
Grace,
it has
go
like
ahead.
headings. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Grace has her hand raised.
Sorry. I just wanted to real quick say I really like the graphs, how they're like almost flow charts. I think that makes it really nice to look
Is
at.
that on the
and
bottom
easy
left
to
here, you
follow.
think? Yeah.
Bottom left, the circles above it, and then the boxes over in the top right.
Got it. Got it. Yep. What about the rest? Is it?
The rest, I think there's definitely a lot on the poster. But I like that they also have photos. I think maybe if they blocked it more like we saw in the last poster, it might be more cohesive.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. This is actually a poster I presented last November up in Washington, D.C. And I would agree. Sometimes, you know, there's an adage about doing what I say, not what I do. I think this poster in some ways doesn't have some of those design characteristics that you might, you know, that I'm suggesting you work with. The specific conference I went was social science research, and a lot of this content on the right we really needed to have in there. So all of that content was a lot of the research studies and some of the results that we had on there. So we were packing a lot of information on to specifically engage with some people that we knew were there. But I think there's some deficiencies in this, and I wanted to at least put one of mine up there and show that, you know, these are challenging to get all of these things right at times. So what about this one? And this one, I think I'll go ahead and just treat this one a little bit. I really like this on the left side. I like this pie chart, this sort of logic diagram or flow over here to the left I like. The rest of it is a little too kind of just gray, and it might, I think I would like to see a little bit more color or maybe a little more variation in what's being presented on here, perhaps some charts or something like that. But to me, overall, this right side was a little, not necessarily text heavy, but definitely not as appealing as what I was seeing on the left side of that for that. What about this one? Does somebody want to jump on to?
I think it has a lot of really interesting pictures, and the graph is really easy to understand. It shows like a clear trend.
Uh-huh.
Um,
What about any weaknesses to it, do you think?
Possibly like not enough information, so you have to kind of like infer a lot about the pictures and what exactly they're describing.
Yeah, I think that was one thing I saw, that there wasn't too much. You definitely need to put some context within those pictures and have those captions that do it. It was a little bit hard to flow too. I don't know if you found that. I saw approach 1 and approach 2, but things were almost so tight together. I was having trouble kind of going from here over, or do I go down and through it, that I think a little bit more white space actually separating these three kind of vertical columns could have helped a little bit for that. So that's one. This one I thought I kind of threw in as one extra one, that, and this one I think was presented at maybe a community, kind of a community fair or something. They're trying to get more people to participate in a restoration program that they're doing. But I think it was, I liked it just to have sort of, I liked the color scheme. To me, it was comfortable. It was relatively simple. They've got some figures on there, pretty simple text. They're also asking questions. And again, this is the nature of doing this, I think, at a specific type of program that they were doing. But I thought I liked the style of this one a little bit. This one, I thought this section up here on the top right, there's a lot there. I think that could be improved a little bit, but I liked kind of seeing how they're taking Armenia and sort of connecting it with people that are doing work and engagement with them in a lot of different areas. This part here, I think, was definitely just a little bit too bullet driven here and here. I think the bullets are sometimes not that effective or as attractive as just sort of getting short text on there that is not perhaps numbered in the way that they're doing that there. And then the last one, and I didn't want to dwell on too many of these. Let me see if somebody can provide a little bit of feedback on this one or what they think of this one at the end. Maybe one of the chaperones too, if anybody is, or the delegate State Academy representatives, if there's somebody. Anybody? I think this one, I don't, if somebody's there, they can jump in, but I really like this one. I found this one, to me, the simplicity of this is outstanding. It kind of flows nicely. you know, I think this was really good. There's not as much data on there. I mean, but I think for this specific study that they did, they had a little bit of their data analysis here that was basically doing some of the coding of responses that they got. But overall, to me, this would be a poster as I walk by that I think, wow, that's really interesting, and would definitely be engaged with and want to approach that. So I think that's one good example. So what we've been able to do is kind of go through, familiarize you, provide the spectrum of poster formats, talk about the different types, share some best practices, and then think a little bit about strengths and weaknesses of some example posters that we had. So I wanted to just take one break here to see if you have any questions at this time about maybe what we've covered with the best practices or the strengths and weaknesses of those poster examples.
We've had a few questions come in through the chat, so I can start there, but please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question you want to ask out loud. So there was a question about if there are any restrictions on things they can bring aside from their poster. I believe this is related to the ISEF restrictive rules or competition rules. But AJAS is not a competition, and as long as it follows the health and safety guidelines of the conference and you can carry it in on your own, I believe you can bring things with you. John, did you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, certainly it is not a competition. It's sort of a celebration of the research that you have, and is very similar to most research conferences you go to, where they're definitely not judging the posters or the presentations and that, but it's sort of an exchange of ideas and networking that occurs for that. And what was the first question? Oh, the additional material or anything. The only thing that I would say, I would suggest a couple things. One thing, you might have a handout with you that could even be an 8.5 by 11 of your poster, which I recognize you can't read very well, but at least reminds people of what the poster looks like. And on your back could have your name and your contact information. So that's sort of an easy way, if somebody approaches you and wants to talk about your research, to be able to share something with them that they can do that. I do not think you're going to have the amount of space around the poster board that I know at ISEF, when I've been to, you've been able to set up computers and some other things in front of it. I think having a simple maybe iPad or something like that, if there's something else that you wanted to show them, or even an example of something that perhaps you built associated with the research, I think those things would work, but there's definitely not going to be like a large table for you to lay things out on the way I remember, at least at ISEF. I haven't been there in a few years, but there was a lot more space there. So limited number of items to share, okay, but don't bring a large amount of stuff.
The next question was about listing affiliations. Is there a rule for how they should list affiliations on the poster, or best practices that you would suggest?
For the affiliation, I guess you probably, your state academy is who nominated you and sent you, as a delegate to this. So I think including them on there. But beyond that, I think you can sometimes use logos. You want to minimize that you're not overwhelming the poster with logos, but you can use logos for those, sort of acknowledging that. But I think an acknowledgement in the bottom would also be a good idea for doing that. Does that answer that okay? I think so.
I think so. Another question, this one came to me privately, but there was a question about who would be available for the poster review during the office hours. So I know I had mentioned in the chat that it would be Dr. Kaup and other members of the board of directors. Someone asked specifically if Dr. Stavely or Dr. Owen, that's me, by the way, I'm Rachel, I'm just not named as such on there, if we would be available. Do you want to comment on who would be available? And I think the question is asking specifically to, is there anybody who has like expertise in their area that they can talk to, or is it just sort of general feedback?
So I think it's going to be there certainly will be people there that have expertise in areas. But I don't think there's no way to sort of match those up. So I'll show you in a minute. There's going to be 3 opportunities for people to come. I think there are going to be 2 or 3 scientists at each of those, and we will certainly try to match ourselves as best we can as the opportunity arises for that. But there aren't going to be sort of a more biological focused for this office hours and physical science for this one, or engineering. So we won't be able to break it up that way. And I've got a couple more slides to get through. I'm happy to take a couple more questions right at the end, perhaps, but let me step through a couple more slides just to get to the end of it. I want to respect people's time, and I see that it's about 7:53. So let me step through these, and then, so a couple final thoughts. One thing that I think this is a great quote: there is no single right way to make a poster. However, there are many wrong ways. Okay. Heavy use of text with no figures is definitely a no-no. Figures and fonts that are too small to read. Again, think of this as 4 to 6 feet away. You need to be able to see it. Blurry images, inconsistent fonts, colors, and word choice. You don't want these flying all over the poster in different sizes and colors. Subheadings should all be the same. Text font and text size should be the same throughout it. You can use color and other things to highlight, but be consistent with the fonts and colors for the subheadings. Being scientifically inaccurate is also a big no-no. Obviously, work with your chaperone and that to do that. We've really been talking more about design, but a lot of this is presenting your research accurately. Make sure there's some white space. And when you use colors, I put this on here, you can see if you start mixing up colors and backgrounds and that, it just gets a little bit obnoxious. So normally 2 or 3 colors are fine to use throughout the poster, but you want to kind of limit it beyond that. So a lot of this, I hope, has helped you. You need to find what works for you. For your specific research that you're doing, you're going to have a certain flow. There's going to be a certain template that works best for the research that you have. The final thing that I would say, and I always use this adage when I work with my father on a lot of woodworking, and you always measure twice and cut once, right? When you're measuring a piece of wood to cut it, measure it twice and cut it once. You can't go back and recut it, right? When you're designing your poster, you're going to review this many, many times to tweak this little aspect of it and this aspect of it before you print it. These posters are somewhat expensive to print. You do not want to print this multiple times. So be sure you're reviewing and working on that and get full approval before it's sent off to print at the end of it. So I hope today we've been able to help you a little bit, feel confident in designing a poster, making one that can engage and draw in people and convey the research that all of you have completed. One reminder, again, that final approval on the posters doesn't come from me or an AJAS or NAS representative. We'll provide some feedback. We'll provide some help during those office hours, but make sure that final approval before you push the print button comes from your chaperone or state academy representative for that. Those additional poster review office hours are listed here on the bottom, and you will get a notification for all registered delegates. Will get something sent out to them with the option to select these Zoom sessions to participate in. All of those, the one thing I would say with those, there's an hour and a half that we're designating for each of those. Feel free to come in at the beginning or middle or end of those, wherever you need to. We're going to have 2 or 3 of us as representatives there to try to help you and engage. You could share your screen. We could look at some things on there, but spread that out. If you're able to come at 7:30 or 8 o'clock on one of those first 2, that might work a little bit better where there's not a big rush right at the beginning and it's hard to get to everybody to be able to share that information for that. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, we put all this effort into making our poster, then we have to share the poster at the event. And that elevator pitch is something that next Sunday at this time, we're going to have. And this is one of the posters that I showed before, and just sort of a breakdown of how you might construct an elevator pitch for that with different sections and amount of time. But next week, we're going to have a great presentation at 7 p.m. with the title being Context, the most important part of communicating your research. So it's going to help you kind of understand what the elevator pitch is and how you can do the best job to explain your research and attract people and pull people in. So Randy Olson is going to be there. And I think Mike Strauss was online as well. If Mike, if you wanted to jump on and just give a quick plug for that. This is my final slide with the additional support office hours listed on there. So Mike,
Yeah.
do you want to jump on?
Sure. Thank you, John. That was an excellent presentation. And I think I'm looking forward to working with you all. We are going to be presenting next week, as John said, some information on context. We're concerned not with your whole poster, as John was. We're concerned with that upper left-hand corner where you've got either an introduction or an abstract. We want to show you how to put that into context. So how you can get the largest number of people to be engaged in your poster, and to tell them what one of the posters she showed told people, which is why everybody should care about your research. What is the point? What is the context of your research? To do that, we've asked you in the information that went out to write us what you would like, what you would consider a short one-sentence description of your work in the form of what we call an and, but, therefore sentence. I would refer you to the note that the admin sent out and a short video to explain what that is. And then I would caution you, don't spend any more than 5 minutes writing this up. We're going to pick a few of them next week as part of it. We're going to go over them. We're going to help you refine them and improve them and show you how that short sentence can be both the introduction to your poster and your elevator pitch, which literally is, imagine not just a full description of your research, but is the description of your research to someone who you're meeting up the elevator about 5 floors. So you got about 30, 40 seconds to tell them why they should care about your research, why it's important, and what you did. So it's going to be a fun session, and we're looking forward to it. But any of you who we'd really appreciate in the next 24 hours that you get those sentences sent back to Rachel, and we'll begin to work with those. Good presentation, John.
Thank you, Mike. And I don't know if we maybe have a time for just a question or two. I know we need to wrap up here in just a minute. People may need to head off. But definitely please take advantage. I know last year people definitely took advantage of those additional sessions and office hours that were offered, but we're happy to be there, and just sometimes it's just helpful to have somebody to bounce some ideas off of. I'm thinking of designing things this way. What do you think? What figure do I need to really